The design of our machine first began with the brake. We initially came up with a design in which a pivoting lever impinged on a spring that had a semicircular clamp mounted to the end, but it was quickly decided that even with a rubberized coating, this would not provide sufficient static friction to prevent lowering. We redesigned the brake to work via a disc with two flanges mounted on the axle such that when a block with two cutouts was slid towards the axle, it would catch a flange and prohibit rotation regardless of direction. While this was not our exact final solution to the problem, this flange design would be improved upon and used in later iterations. The next big hurdle was determining how to achieve both directions of rotation. At first, we thought of having two sets of spur gears, one involving two in direct contact, and the other having a smaller idler gear in between the two main ones to maintain the rotational direction of the initial shaft. We changed the design to have a set of chain-driven sprocket gears running in parallel to the spur gear set, since chains ensure the same direction of rotation. We designed a sliding plate with a D-profile cutout that had pegs mounted on both sides that would fit into slots on these two free-spinning gears. This way, we could slide this clutch plate into either gear, and the axle it was mounted on could spin in either direction depending upon the mating. We also recognized that we could simplify our previously separate clutch and brake mechanisms into one, by including the flanges seen before on the clutch, and adding a wooden block below the clutch such that when it was slid out of engagement with either gear into neutral, the flange would hit the block and the axle would be prevented from rotating. After this axle, we needed a way to transmit power to the final output axle, which needed to be mounted 90 degrees to the other ones per the testing setup. Initially, our design only included 12-inch long shafts, which made this directional transition difficult since the output shaft would have to be mounted on a larger height than the others. But once we found 6-inch shafts were purchasable on McMaster Carr, we made the appropriate redesigns for all shafts to be in plane with each other. After all these components had been largely defined, we began manufacture and assembly.
After assembly of our first gear train, we began testing our setup in the Innovation Studio. This quickly revealed some issues with shifting our clutch in and out of gear, with our original setup involving poppers that were used to pop the clutch in and out of engagement with the spur and sprocket gears. After experiencing difficulty, we widened the clutch and put a cutout in the middle so that a semicircular wrench could be used to shift it left and right. We also decided to lengthen the pins to become arcs to improve fitment and strength.
Granny shifting, not double clutching like you should.
Another problem we dealt with was making sprockets that worked well with our length of chain and shaft spacing, since we didn't have the pre-manufactured metallic ones to accompany our chain, which came from a discarded bicycle. We had to cut our own out of 1/8-inch acrylic and then sand them down to the appropriate thickness. We went through quite a few designs, making small tweaks on each until finally cutting a pair that achieved the desired chain tension.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
However, even after finally making a working pair, they did not remain working forever. While testing our device by having it raise a weight attached to the spool, the D profile on the hole in the drive sprocket sheared and became effectively an O profile, meaning that it spun in place when attempting to move a load. To prevent this from happening again, we slightly downscaled our CAD dimensions to ensure a tighter fit between the D profile and the axle. A separate change that nevertheless aided in this prevention was the addition of set screw mounted collars on either side of each unit in our gear train, which both reduced stress on individual gears and slop in positioning, resulting in smoother operation.
Nice.
At the beginning of the gear train, we have the pulley gear, which connects via pulley to the central powered shaft used during testing. This lies on the same axle as a 12th tooth spur gear, which is in direct contact with a 20-tooth spur gear, as seen here. This 20-tooth spur gear shares an axle with both a 16-tooth spur gear and an 18-tooth sprocket, both of which are mated to identically sized counterparts on the next axle. However, these counterparts differ in that they have O-profile openings versus the D profiles seen on the other gears, allowing them to freely spin about the axle. Between these two free spinning gears is a white sliding clutch, which rotates alongside the shaft and has teeth that interface with those seen on the gears in light brown. This makes it so that power transmission from the axle to the gears occurs only when desired, and allows for the bidirectionality of rotation required by the project. Seen below the clutch is a small wooden brake, which catches flanges sticking out on the clutch such that the wire spool does not unravel due to gravity when the system is in neutral. At the end of this axle lies a bevel gear, which interfaces with an identical one to provide the 90-degree transferal of motion dictated by the output shaft's location. This final axle then rotates the spool, which raises or lowers the weight.
On the final day of testing, our machine was able to successfully lift both the empty bucket and the bucket with 1 kilogram of weight added. Unfortunately, when we attempted to add a second kilogram, one of our bevel gears experienced a shear on its inner D profile similar to the sprocket mentioned before. Throughout our testing, we had not experienced issues with this part and had instead focused on iterating on other parts. In the final test, the gradual wear due to numerous rounds of testing had weakened it enough that it no longer spun with the D shaft.
Overall, this project helped us gain experience regarding gear design and interactions, and also tolerancing when working with 3D printed and laser cut parts. We also learned to work within the strength limitations of the materials we had available to us. We refined our task delegation and cooperation skills and successfully stuck to checkpoints we set and discussed solutions to problems when they arose. We believe that this is both a worthwhile and engaging academic project, and hope that future classes enjoy completing it as well.